Okay, so let's look then into the future. The last question I have is specifically on the ethics side of things, right? So if we were, I want you, for those of you that are out there, I want you to think of a world without this kind of traditional banking system. Now, maybe some of you are kind of salivating at the idea. That sounds like a great thing because, again, you hate waiting in line. But is it a good thing for us to be so far removed from the banking system? And so just to give you a bit of context to that, there are certain institutions within society, including the medical field, including the legal field, where we intentionally require them, for example, to not incorporate to ensure that they are a strong part of these communal systems. And I'm just curious what you think. I mean, if the banking system is so decentralized that you don't have that corner bank, that you don't have someone you can talk to, to go borrow money from to buy a home, right? We've already talked about AI being introduced in this. If there's no human component, do we worry about, ethically speaking, do we worry about the ability for people to actually access finance, not just in terms of accessing finance, but actually like understanding it and really like, I guess, being in control of their financial future?
Yeah, so I think that's a really compelling point in the sense that I think there are a lot of things that will go into play here. One is this kind of education component. There's a big push increasingly in many places in the world to ensure that from a young age, children understand finance. Not in the sense of like, oh, let's go all be Warren Buffett and invest in stocks, but like understanding the purpose of interest and credit and why sometimes I can be good, sometimes I cannot be good. And I think part of that is just basic financial education is important. Now, building on that, to your question, this is something we will touch on throughout the course, but the kind of the issue of access. There will surely be populations that will be displaced if they're not accounted for and used, right? So either because they can't access technology yet, or even though their nation or society generally accesses technology because of age or other reasons that they can't, they're not as familiar with, they don't feel comfortable with that, they'll be increasingly shut out. So that process, by its very definition, will need to be transitional in order to ensure kind of the widest amount of fairness as possible. But is that the ultimate kind of end goal of all of this? To be honest, I don't know. What is the end state? What is the kind of the normative end state of all of this? What do we really want out? I don't think anybody knows. Right? People just feel like, hey, we've had friction in this. Let's just make it smoother. Is there a way we can do it faster? I mean, this is effectively what the motivation is. I don't think a lot of people are thinking about what are the next order implications if we do this from a societal perspective. I
do think that what you're going to see is you're going to start seeing a lot of what we call pro bono or low bono, meaning like free services, where banks or other nonprofits and community groups are going to form credit unions, they're going to form financial institutions in order to ensure banking for the poor. And you're already seeing that. Here in Hong Kong, we've talked about foreign domestic workers here in Hong Kong, how 10% of Hong Kong's working population are migrant workers. Many of them are underbanked. And there are multiple sources of, I guess, traditional banking, especially from a credit union standpoint, where they try to ensure that they can get access to these things. It's still the penetration is very low, but I think you're going to start to see as the traditional industry gets more and more removed from people on the ground, especially those that are more poor and disadvantaged, I think you're going to start seeing more and more kind of service providers on a charitable basis come in.
And I think the challenge with kind of a lot of the stuff we're discussing comes in two ways. One is, as technology evolves, how confident are we that kind of these stakeholders that are serving people who will be underbanked or not as economically advantaged, will they be able to scale up in terms of the technology that they need? In a lot of discussions that I have talking to banks, they have no difficulty hiring for most roles. They always have difficulty hiring for what in the past was considered IT, but now a lot of banks are actually calling them, they don't call them IT anymore, they'll call them like engineering or technologist, or to make it have a different veneer, right?
A lot of pretty advanced programming, right? You've got the privacy side, you've got the security side, right? You've got they're building out new tools, including the blockchain type stuff, right? There's a lot of things.
Yeah, and so what they found is a lot of these banks, particularly in the U.S. and Europe, they're competing directly for the same talent that maybe Google or Facebook is competing for.
Totally.
And so this is the challenge that they face. So to the point,
especially because those graduates don't think of going to J.P. Morgan, they don't think of going to HSBC. They're thinking, okay, there's no like Silicon Valley, right? They're thinking Google. They're going to Facebook. They're going to Netflix.
And that's one question I think that's to be determined. And the second, I think, which is more broad, which I think pervades many aspects of this course, are the idea of like regulation. So historically, we've had financial regulators, and we've had regulators over certain aspects of communication and industry. Now, is that going to change as we have different players that start occupying the finance
Well, we
space?
know it will. Yeah,
Right.
the question is how.
Yeah, and so if you had a tech fin that came from non-financial industry, come into to do something traditional banking, so maybe non-brick and mortar, just online, will they be doubly regulated? I mean, how will that work? Particularly when the regulatory regimes are probably not consistent, as well as global in nature. And so then you kind of get a lot of interesting and kind of frustrating friction that will occur. And I think that'll take a long time to unravel as people try to figure that out.
Yeah. So I think these are a lot of the questions that society is going to have to kind of entertain and hopefully answer over time. One of the things that I often think about is, should we even consider banks as traditional banks even now, or have they really already morphed into essentially technology firms? For a lot of the banks that I know, and a lot of the people that I know that work in them, they actually have as many or more IT professionals as they do actual bankers and finance professionals. And so I think, as we continue to move forward, some of the questions that we need to consider are how we as society want to engage on a personal level with these institutions. And I guess on a more simple question, do you hate going to your bank as much as we do? Do you see this as a positive thing or a negative thing? We're curious.